Good morning.
Hello there. Hello. How are you doing today?
I am good. Well, I say I'm good. It's like, have you seen that meme where they they say the therapist says, "And how are you?" And they go, "Yeah, yeah, I'm good." And then they start talking and they're like, "Oh, I'm really not good." There's all this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
um,
I always have that at the start of a when I'm leading a coaching session, I have to really like retrain my automatic reflex to say,
mm,
"How are you?" at the beginning because it completely can derail the call if you ask that one question immediately.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But you just can't, can you?
No, but isn't it so interesting? Like it immediately comes out your mouth as soon as you see someone's face, you're like, "Oh, hey, how are you?" As a coach, you have to
Automatic.
be like, no, bring it back.
Yeah, exactly. Um, well, everything's good overall, but I am on day 24 of my cycle today. So I'm like fully in PMS vibes. And my friend Louise recommended this app to me recently, and it's called like your hormone horoscope or something like that.
Oh,
It's really cool. So every like you put where you are in your cycle in, and then every day you can open it and it will just tell you about that day of your cycle, like what your hormones are doing and how that will likely affect you. So instead of what the stars and planets are doing, it's what your body's doing.
I
Um,
love that.
it's really cool. And it's the free version is they do a paid one, but the free version is brilliant. So highly recommend. And I was like, woke up this morning feeling like demotivated and pessimistic and like my whole life needs to be ripped up like a bit of paper and totally created from scratch. And like everything's just a mess and it's wrong and bad.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the danger for me is like when I have those thoughts of like, this is a mess, what am I doing? The danger for me is like trying to work from that place, trying to be like,
Mhm.
okay, well, things need fixing. So let me, get my notebook and open my business Google Drive and look at things. Like,
Yeah.
um, it's just such a bad idea. And it literally says on this app this morning, like, if you're feeling pessimistic today or like everything's wrong, like don't act on it, like wait until next week and just see how you feel then before you make any drastic action. And I really needed to hear that this morning.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to me. I used to really run my business in sync with my monthly cycle, and I just got out of the routine of it. But seeing
Mhm.
that today, I thought, oh, actually, I really need to remember everything I learned about that and start employing it again because it makes a massive difference. I would have had a really bad day today if I had just acted on what my mind was telling me. And the fact that it's actually connected to my biology is just fascinating to me how my it's not the truth. And I think that's really cool to see because when you have a thought in your mind, right, you kind of take it as gospel, don't you? Like you're like, well, that must be the truth. And
Yeah. It's in
actually,
my voice. It sounds like me, so it must
yeah,
be what I think.
yeah, this is true. This is like there's nothing more. And obviously I know there's so much more, but in that moment you hear it, it feels like there isn't. And yeah, it's just cool to me that it's actually hormonal. Like that's such a grounding feeling for me that it's not the truth. I'm feeling a certain way because of the changes in my biology and my hormones and all that. And then those feelings, my mind is taking and creating a thought that matches the feeling. And then I'm taking that thought seriously when actually I just need to eat some sugar and go for a walk and like not work today
Yeah.
is a
It's
nice thing.
it's so interesting, isn't it? I think I've never like actually tracked the days and moods and everything by
Oh
cycle.
my gosh.
I know I've never, I think partly because I'm just so terrible at sticking to a routine. So literally, if I say to myself, right, I've got to write a little, even if it's one line, even if it's one line,
Mhm.
just to write in my journal or whatever to say, this is how I felt today. I will do like 2 days max. Like
Yeah,
even the first day,
yeah.
sometimes I'll have the thought and I'll be then it won't ever happen. But But I did notice a little while ago, I was like, oh my gosh, every week before my period, I think my whole life is a mess. I think everything is shit. I want to change everything. I want to scrap everything I've done for the last 3 weeks, or
Mhm.
for the last 30 years,
Yeah.
and and restart everything. And I think it was on a call with you. I said, like, I can't listen to that anymore because I keep
Mm.
scrapping things. And I think there must be some usefulness in that phase.
Yeah.
There must be some things that, okay, yes, are valid, that hormonal cycle brings to the surface, because that's one of the beauties of being a woman, and or of having a hormonal cycle,
Mm.
that we do get to experience those cyclical shifts. So if something does need to change, we notice it much
Yeah.
quicker, potentially. And
Yeah.
but when we're changing everything, we don't get to notice those things that are actually meant to rise up and fall during that time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that you're so right. Like that is the benefit, isn't it? Of well, I see through. I've read somewhere they were like, you just see through bullshit so much more easily at that point of your
Right.
cycle, and so it's like, okay, well, if I've been bullshitting myself about something, I'll also see that more clearly.
Yes.
Um, so that for me like definitely is a benefit, and I find I can do that really well like day 22, day 23, like the early autumnal phase of the cycle. But then like the late autumn, it's just everything is the worst. Like I wanted to shout at the yoga teacher in yoga last night. I like wanted to tell him to piss off and walk out.
Why? What was he doing?
Oh, he was making us plank for so long because he was saying, like, come into plank. And then he was saying, engage your glutes, engage your core, breathe, blah, blah, blah. And then he was like, we're going to stay here for 5. And I'm like, we've already been in here for 5 because you've just talked for 5. Like, and he kept doing it. And I hate it.
Oh no.
I could see through his bullshit so well.
I'm not here to plank. I'm here for my mental stability, not my core stability. For God's sake.
Exactly. God damn it. Yeah. So, but yeah, by this point, it's just I think I need to realize that I can't work on these days, but I could coach on these days because actually, I think some of that, like seeing through the veil and like being a bit more direct, can sometimes be a really nice juxtaposition to my normal coaching style. But
Mm.
um, but for my own work, it's not a time to really be um creating new things or like being excited, because one thing I found really helps me at this time of the month is cleaning.
Mm.
And I'm not someone who loves to clean. Like I most of the time that's a huge chore for me. But cleaning at this point feels so good because it's like clearing out, clearing out, clearing out. It's movement, it's energetic. And so
Mm.
I feel like maybe I just need to find tasks in my business that would really suit this energy, like this physical cleaning could become like, yeah, what do I need to clean up? What are like those loose ends that I can tie up
Mm.
before the next cycle begins?
Oh, yeah, that's so powerful. And those are things that you're likely to ignore or forget about in those more energetic phases of your cycle.
Yeah, because it's not like the fun, exciting, like sexy stuff, is it?
Mm.
So when I'm in those other points, I don't want to be sorting out my Google Drive. Like that seems really boring.
Whoever wants to sort out their Google finds an utter shambles.
I did. One tip I have on this is just because I was like, I have to sort through every single document, and there's so many things I've started and not finished, and little ideas I've jotted down and that kind of thing. Just create an archive folder called archive and just move it all into that.
Nice, nice. Yeah. And then at some point in the future, maybe when you're really bored, you can tend to the archive folder, but that's for a different day. But
Yeah.
has it felt challenging to be aware that you can't do certain things at certain times, or has it felt good?
I guess from this place, I feel frustrated, but and that's like part of it, isn't it? Like feeling the surges of the hormones because, I love the work that I do. Like I want to do it. I want to be excited about it. I want to be in it. And so today it did feel a bit frustrating because I thought, well, we have this call and I don't have anything else scheduled for today. I was planning to go and work for like 4 hours outside of the home, which I love to do, but I know that if I go and do that, I'll sit there for 4 hours, and by the end of it, I'll feel really depleted and really frustrated and really down about everything, and that I'll sit there not really knowing what task to focus on. And I think the issue that I have with this is that I could work today, but it won't be work that I want to do, and I'll end up it will have been a waste of my time because the work I do today won't be work that I really love next week.
Mm.
And next week, when I have that energy, I could get done in 35 minutes, what I could get done in 3 hours today.
Mm.
It's actually a waste of my time. So it does and it doesn't feel challenging. Like I think if anything, it does feel empowering to realize it. If I hadn't known that this was about my hormones, I would believe it and it would feel real. And that would be so much worse.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's such a difference between being able to sort of work with your natural rhythms and be able to notice, okay, this is this phase, this is that phase, so this is the type of thing that I do in this phase, and between being flung by your natural rhythms from one thing to another. And I think most of us, or at least a lot of us, are sort of accidentally in the being flung around. I
Yeah.
can definitely resonate with that. And I think one of the things, that we've spoken about that I struggle with is that there are there are definitely rhythms that I'm aware of. And then when they don't fit nicely, like really comfortably into the sort of allocated time that I have available for that week, it feels like doubly frustrating. Like there's already the frustration within the cyclic phase, and then there's like, oh, but now I'm in this phase in a week where I only have, X amount, 4 hours, whatever, to devote to my business or to my work or to something that I really want to do. And then I get to those hours and it's like nothing's there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really like that's the part that I find challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess like there's something about expectation in here that's like knocking at me here because I think this is what the frustration you're feeling and the frustration I'm feeling, and I kind of feel like there must be an expectation that's being disappointed in that. And like, when I heard you say like this is all the time I have, and so then if there's nothing there, it's even worse. And I totally hear that. And I just think like, what are these expectations that we're putting on ourselves to be able to have this time and do this within a certain time period? Like are we putting time periods on our dreams, and is that adding to that frustration? Like could we, if we were more flexible with our time frames, would that soften it at all? I wonder.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, I was thinking this morning, like what really feels different about allowing a sort of give and take, a flow aspect to my work, because there are some elements of which that feels very easy. At some weeks when there's just nothing there for me to write, I feel perfectly comfortable with just allowing that to go. And but then there are there are other things that feel, that don't feel as easy to allow to flow. And I think the difference is when there's a should involved, when there's this element of, well, I should be doing this, or I should want to do this, then it becomes much more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Like anytime we're putting, because when you're in a coaching world, whether you become a coach or you work with a coach, like, coaching is so much about setting goals. And like, I don't really set goals in the way that I was trained to with my clients. But because what I've realized is that when we set a goal with a time frame attached to it, it might be motivating on one hand, but what I notice is that it seems to create so much trouble with the other. Like it creates this this expectation, this I should reach that, I should be able to, a whole heap of pressure. And it also doesn't allow for life to go step by step and like take you off a different fork in the road. Like I just feel like sometimes when I've been so tunnel visioned on an outcome or something that should happen, I miss all of the opportunity that's around me because I'm not looking at it and I'm not available for it. So it's an interesting like balance between some discipline, I guess, and like I do think that it has a place in business for sure, and some like being open to the magic of what can come in if you are unattached. And like I feel like I'm forever juggling those two states.
Yeah, me too. Like I'm gonna give a slightly embarrassing example right now.
Love that.
So I have basically gotten myself into the habits of not leaving the house. And like I was saying to Jason, on my partner, on Friday night, we went out for some drinks, and we were talking about, because we've just moved, we were in this new place, new community, potentially, new things that are available. And I said to him that the problem is I can't even explain how unnatural it feels to just go out. And it's so ridiculous. And I kind of like, and it's not even like there's a should involved. So there's no should involved here. It's not like as though I'm thinking like I really should leave the house, but I don't want to. It just doesn't cross my mind. Like the day passes and I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't left today. And that I'm very aware that it feels very uncomfortable for me to break that habit. But it's something that I am also very aware that I don't want to take real root in my life. Like that's not how I want to live my life. And even though it feels like, if we kind of apply the sort of business terms that we hear in the coaching world, sometimes people were advised, oh, this is just the season, it's just we're in a season of uncreativity, for example. And so therefore, just wait until the creative season comes back around. And although I think that is very true to a certain extent, I'm not in a season of being like a hermit. Like that's not, it's no longer a season, it's just a habit, and it's becoming something that I feel like could negatively impact my life if I allow this habit to continue. So I went to a jewelry workshop yesterday.
Oh, amazing.
It was amazing, great fun. I made 3 rings and it was wonderful. I absolutely loved it. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to book it. I booked it maybe like 6 weeks ago or something. And it came around and I was absolutely terrified. but you know, the discomfort of doing it was necessary. That element of discipline in this embarrassing example of me not wanting to interact with anybody else, like, is necessary in order for me to live in a way that is overall enjoyable and excuse me, enjoyable and nourishing. So there's like, where how do we distinguish between whether something is a season or whether it's like a negative or, you know, discouraging habit that we're just allowing to take root?
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so important to be asking, because I know that I'm gonna do like a little something about this because it's been on my mind a while, but this idea of allowing things to flow, I keep seeing we've talked about this, but I keep seeing people being like, I surrender to the flow and now I'm just static. I'm like, that's not flow. Like it's not flow, is movement. Flow is dynamic, it's action. And I think there is definitely this feeling of like almost it becoming an enabler for a cyclic unhealthy pattern. And like the ego kind of attaches itself to that thing and makes it okay to do that because, oh, I'm this or I'm that, or it's creative winter, whatever. And those things definitely exist, but yeah, discernment between them is such an important thing. And something I was reading about recently was shadow work, and I haven't really done a lot of reading about shadow work. Oh, one moment. Yeah, so something, what was I saying? It's gone. Oh, shadow work, shadow work.
Yes,
Yes. Yeah, for some reason I just haven't really been when I've seen people talk about shadow work, it just hasn't ever been something that's been interesting to me. Like I've never really gone and looked into it. And then I was reading a book that I loved the other day, and it started talking about it, and I was like, oh, this is so much more interesting than I thought it was.
Oh, what was the difference?
Well, because the way I've seen people talk about it is as if it's like this dark, evil part of you with like bad intention, you know, like, and I just can't really, I don't always think that's like psychologically helpful to make someone think that they have a darkness in them. Like, you know, especially in the Western world, if you've grown up with like Christian background and stuff, like you're touching on some really like scary, even if you don't believe it consciously at this point, right? Like you're touching on some really deeply held values and ideas about light and dark and heaven and hell and the devil and all of that. So I just haven't been interested in that. But then it described it, and like if I'd have looked into it, I'd have learned that that's not what it is anyway. But I didn't until now. And they were saying like what it is it's just the part of you that is out of your conscious grasp, right? Like it's out of the light of consciousness, so it's in the shadow.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And the reason I'm talking about this is because if we're not doing something that we consciously say we want to do, then there's probably something subconscious that is making us not do it, right? Like there's probably a very good, valid reason that we're not doing it, that's just out of conscious grasp. And so something that I've been doing recently, and like we talked about it on our coaching calls, is if there's something I'm not doing, I'm asking myself the question, what is the really valid reason that I'm not doing this? Like if there was a really valid reason that I'm not doing this, what would that be? And it's been so insightful for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it really draws attention to the places where, you know, if we sort of combine these two, we combine this element of should with this element of discernment around what's truly valid about the reason why we're not doing something. You know, if something is too layered with shoulds, it's probably not something that we want to do anyway.
Yeah.
And if once you've removed the shoulds, it's still there as a desire, as a wistful yearning or something there, then there's probably a valid reason why you're not doing it. And I think that's kind of, if you can get to the root of that. I mean, I'm just the last 2 years have put me in a negative routine with not leaving the house, coupled with the fact that I'm sort of terrified of losing all my friendships. So these kind of things, they form this valid reason for me to stay in the house and not make new connections, not interact with a new community, doing things that I want, reaching out to people. So there's validity there, and it's still something that I want to do. So then we can kind of work through how to bypass that validity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's just interesting to see, like, if we're not taking action, it's probably because there's like a battle inside us between two opposing ideas about what the right thing is. And so when there's that back and forth battle, there's like, I really want to do this, I'm not doing this, add in all the shame of not doing it, right? And like, that's shame has a lot of like power over us as well. So for me, it feels like there's this internal battle, which means that just no action can happen, because even if a little bit of energy on one side of the battle is like, yes, I want to do this, very quickly it's depleted by this other side coming in. Even if I'm not conscious of this happening, that's what's happening for me if I'm static, I'm not doing something. And so what I'm finding is like, well, how can I act more as one integrated being? Like, it's not that my conscious self is more valid than my unconscious self. Like, what if they're both totally valid and they both just need hearing so that I can be an integrated person and not being a battle inside me all the time?
Yeah, which is then the state of flow, i.e., you know, allowing both sides of you to have a say, and not necessarily to flow between the two of them, but to allow, I guess, the whichever one is sort of actively dealing with something in that moment, because sometimes it might be either one side is actively dealing with something, but to process that in real time. And when I say real time, I don't mean like 30 seconds. I mean, like, it might take 2 weeks, it might take 6 months, it might take 30 seconds, but
yes, exactly. It feels like maybe it would be helpful to bring in an example here. I'm wondering, did I already talk about my yoga example on these calls? I don't know if I did. Maybe I did.
I don't think that you have, but either way, I'm sure even if you have, it will bring a different light through the lens of this conversation.
Yeah, I just think it would be interesting to have an example to make it, really bring it to life a little bit. So my recent example was saying I want to do yoga, saying I want to go to yoga classes, and I used to go. I went every week for a year at one period of time, and I loved it and I looked forward to it and it was great. And then I just, things changed and I haven't been for like 3 years. So there's this feeling like, I want to go. Found a class, it was the right class, it was the right price, like it's in the right area, everything's good. And there's just still this, like you said about the jewelry class, like the time card, I book it and I'm like excited. The time comes, it's the day of, I wake up, I don't want to go tonight. Straight away, don't want to go tonight. This was yesterday. And I mean, the stupid man made us plank for ages, so maybe that part of me was right. But and we talked about this in our coaching call and brought this out, like, the shadow unconscious reason for that is feeling like my needs are not as important as other people's needs around me. So if I take myself out to a yoga class, I'm not there to do these things that other people need me to do. And just that my personal need to go and have some time for myself is not prioritized. This is all subconscious. Like, I've thought I'm someone who is easily able to prioritize my needs because, I take myself off for like hours at a time and work in a cafe and spend my money on whatever I want and all that kind of thing. But for some reason, this yoga thing, it just wasn't quite landing for me. And so the subconscious idea is like, it's safer, it's more important to deprioritize your own needs. So that's why I'm battling like that. I want to do a yoga class. Like, that's got nowhere near as much like strength and energy as your needs are not important. So yesterday morning when I woke up, like, oh, I'm not gonna go. And all day I was like, no, I'm not going tonight. I'm not going tonight. It's cold, it's rained all day. The class is at 6 o'clock. That's too late.
When before it was the perfect time.
It was the perfect time last time. 6 o'clock. And I caught myself being like, yeah, well, I need to cook dinner and I need to do this. And we had talked about that on our call, and it was why it clicked in for me, like, I'm doing that thing where I'm going, the need of the family that I'm cooking for is more important than me saying, oh, can you finish off this meal because I'm going to be at yoga.
Yeah.
And in that moment, there was like this choice moment of, well, is that true for me? Like, what can I do to support that part of me that's saying these people need me more than that's more important than my need to go to yoga? So then instead of just being like, no, ignoring, banishing that kind of idea, it was like, well, how can I do both? Is there any way that I can still support these responsibilities that I have, that I've committed to, which is cooking dinner for the family, which I love to do, it's not a burden on me, and go to yoga? So I was like, yes, I can. I can prep it, I can get it ready, and I can just say to Rob, oh, can you just do this, this, and this? It's the last 10 minutes of putting this meal together. And it just really supported me to be integrating both the ideas and not just being like, no, I'm going, you cook dinner tonight, right? I wouldn't have felt good about that. That wouldn't have satisfied that part of me, because there is a part in me that wants to do that and wants to commit to that. So that part is just as valid as the part that wants to do yoga.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a good example, because there's so much. We can kind of take something that's like almost trivial, and I don't mean that to
Yeah, no, it is though. It
but
is, yeah.
to take an example that's like normal, this is
Yeah.
like, we do this every single day. Our brains are reshuffling our hierarchies of need, of importance, to say, okay, no, it's that classic example of, you start the beginning of a week being like, this is going to be the best week of my life, I'm going to have a wonderful time. And then by Wednesday afternoon, once those hierarchies in our brains have shifted around context, we shift and we change, and we decide that actually maybe next week was a better idea. But yeah, we this happens every single day, all the time. We're constantly playing with these hierarchies, playing with the needs of what's relevant to us in the moment. And I think what the idea of flow is, rather than it being like I allow whatever is coming up to come up, it's kind of much more about what's relevant in my sort of hierarchy right now. What do I need to tend to? Do I need to tend to the subconscious part of myself, or do I actually need to bring the subconscious part of myself along with me? I make myself leave the house, or make yourself go to yoga, or whatever the example is. And there's a time for both.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So what do you think that says about consistency?
Mm. Yeah, I think that I've like changed my views on this so much over the years. Like, I used to obviously work in a corporate environment where it was of utmost importance to be consistently productive, like livelihood, as in income, was tied to consistent productivity. So I
Mm.
think like, living through that for 10 years and that being my constant like motivation in my work life meant that when I came into business, and like even still now sometimes there's this like rebellion against that because it was so rooted in. I had to work so hard to undo it and like undo some of that. My income is tied to it, kind of thing. Like I really had to break that down a bit because it was at an unhealthy level because
Yeah.
of the environment that I'd worked in before. And so there was a lot of breaking down of that. And then I guess more recently, like I'm questioning, like, well, what does that mean? Because what it doesn't mean to me is like, oh, all right, because what could happen is on a day like today, when I'm feeling hormonally charged, let's say, um, I could sit there and be like, right, I need to change up my whole business. I'm going to commit to 30 days of posting reels on Instagram, right? Like that could be a thought I could have
Yeah.
today.
It's 100% a thought I've had in my in my life. One of those energetic weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and so me then committing to do that and then doing that consistently wouldn't be right for me because I guess I think it's about what you're consistently committing to. If you're
Right.
if you're having an inspired idea that is like genuinely coming from inspiration, coming from love, coming from energy, coming from purpose, coming from
Mm.
passion, and it's not always going to feel like that, then yes, like let's bring in some discipline, let's bring in some consistency for it. But I think what I've seen myself doing in the past and what I see other people try and do is commit to consistency on something that came out of fear, an idea that came out of fear.
Mm.
And I think
Yeah.
then you're just committing to fear every day instead of purpose and passion and love.
Yeah, that's very true. Or committing to consistency for consistency's sake,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
like there's like a palpable difference to me between being like, okay, I'm going to commit to 30 days worth of posting reels every day, because I want to be consistent.
Yeah.
That tastes bad even in my mouth to say it.
Yeah.
Or to say, gosh, I'm so like this season of, or the month of November is such an unexplored month for me. It generally is
Mm,
dark or it's raining or it's awful. So actually, I'm going to, for the 30 days of November, I'm going to find something seasonal to post or, whatever.
yeah.
Like that to me feels different. Um, and also with the caveat of if halfway through November it's very unenjoyable to be doing so, to allow it to be gone. Because if you then reach that point where you're continuing to do it, you are then doing it just for consistency's sake. Although, see, this is when my brain argues with itself,
Mm-hmm.
because um, there is a muscle. There is a muscle that needs to be um, worked. Creativity is one for me that I'm very aware if I don't use it, I lose it. And
Yeah.
it, although I might get flashes of inspiration, I won't act on those flashes of inspiration because I haven't utilized the creative muscle.
Yeah.
And so they just fade.
Yeah. I think this almost circles back to like the should question. doesn't
Right.
it? Because it almost feels like if you're doing it because you should do it, like that, the thing is, it's disempowering, isn't it? Like if you do something because you should do it, it drains your energy rather than gives you energy.
Mm.
Whereas if you are questioning, like, well, for what purpose? I guess that's the question, like, for what purpose? So, say you're halfway through the month of November, you're starting to feel like drained by the commitment you made.
Mm.
It's like taking that moment to go, if I carried on, would that only be because I should carry on? Because that's going to be draining. But maybe there's this thing of like, no, I want to carry on because I want to show myself that I can commit to something that I said I was going to do. And that's actually going to feel really empowering for me to show myself that when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So
Yeah.
I think there's something in that, isn't there, of like the energy with which you come at it, because if something's like really, really depleting you, and it's all like, no one wants to do things that are genuinely draining. Um, but sometimes the benefit is not just in doing the thing, it's in, yeah, showing that you do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's this sort of, it harks to, is hark a word? Is it?
It works for me. Yeah.
Hark the herald angels. Okay, it just it reminds me or makes me think of wider business practices, and this sort of damaging tactics of the way that large scale businesses impact the planet and things like that is basically because they're doing something they said they were going to do, and they're going to do it at no matter the cost.
Yeah.
Like, got to continue, got to build those profits, got to reach our goals, all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think we're bringing in, or there are feminine business practices coming in, which is much more about flow and about noticing the impact of what we're doing, and everything we're saying about working cyclically and noticing the effect we're having on both ourselves and our environment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very I find it difficult personally to navigate that line, and to navigate, okay, where's the place at which I need to work this muscle to create something to honor my word to myself. I'm in the middle of a rebranding process at the moment, and working on reforming my business, and I just had COVID and moved house. So basically everything that I was doing has fallen by the wayside. So there's a part of me that's like, that needs to recommit and needs to reestablish where I'm going with that, because it did fall away and the work that I was doing has collapsed on it. So, I've slightly lost my train of thought, but there's a very fine line for me between recommitting, following through on my word, and knowing when something is right to fall away. And I think so for this rebranding thing as an example, something in me is still connected to it. Like, there's still I can still get in touch with wanting to be there with it. Whereas I know if something really does want to fall away and I need to let it fall away, that that connection isn't there. I guess we're talking about relationships, and it's when our relationships with our work, with ourselves, there's always, I guess, some points in a relationship where you need to work at something, where you need to sit down and talk something through, or create some boundaries or whatever. And there's sometimes when a relationship is just going to fall away.
Yeah.
but it's hard to navigate, especially once we're bringing in, we need to bring in new business practices, but they're not as easy to follow. It's actually much easier. Well, I say easy, it's not easy for me to be consistent. But the path is well trodden in the old business practices, in the route to consistency, productivity. We know that path well. We don't quite know this path.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it depends on what you deem as success, right? Like if we're saying, these, like you mentioned, these big companies that, their mark points of success is money, like is profit, like that's their goal. And they don't seem to have many other goals apart from that. And so I guess like, and this is where I think the feminine business practice comes in, of like, well, is that what you're aiming for? Because if the only thing that's important to you is your profit, then yeah, follow those masculine, as you say, tried and tested consistency. There's lots of people running businesses, even in like our kind of world, who are using those business models, business practices, and doing well in terms of profit. So like that is a viable option, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I think what we're talking about is like having goals beyond profit. And for me, like it would not be success for me to make £1 million a year, but have no time out, no time with family and friends, to feel like I wasn't following my heart in my work. I have other measures of success. So I think there's that. And also the question, I'm reading this book at the moment called The Tao of Physics, and it's so cool. It's written by a physicist who started to find all of these similarities between what physics are finding out and like ancient Eastern religions and what they say, and like finding like basically proof for what's been being said through physics. And it's such a cool perspective, because he's coming from the physics side, and it's so interesting. But the very first page says something that comes from Buddhism, which is a question of, is there heart in the path? And I really like that question, right, for this kind of thing. Like when we're deciding, do I carry on committing to this or not? I think that question for me could really ground me in that moment, to go, is there still heart in the path here for me? Because even if I don't want to do it, there could still be heart in it.
Absolutely. I.e. the jewelry workshop, the yoga, like there was still, there's still heart in the path of doing something that doesn't necessarily feel particularly good.
Yeah. And so here's where I think like the skills of coaching really come into play, of like, let's ask ourselves better questions. Like, let's ask ourselves, well, what does success mean to me beyond the finances? And instead of, oh, I really should do this, so how can I force myself? Let's ask, is there still heart in the path for me here? Like, better questions, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think there's it allows that navigation between, everything that we've been talking about today, between consistency, between flow. Really, it feels like to me, like as though previously it's been like an either or conversation. Like, am I being consistent, or am I being in flow? And the truth is not really either. It's neither, and it's both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes we have to go and explore the thing to know whether there's still heart in it for us. Like, I've got just another example of I've wanted to do an art degree since I was 18. The circumstances when I was 18 were not conducive to me doing that art degree at the time. And so it's been this thing that I've held on to for all this time. You know, I'm turning 34 this month. That's a long time. And, you know, to feel like, oh, I just want to go and do it. I just want to do an art degree. That's what my heart is telling me. And it's been this kind of like, I'm going to do it one day. And then, you know, we moved to a different part of the country, and here there is a really good arts uni.
Wow.
And so I was like, oh, it's a sign, it's the time to do this art degree. And so I was like, I'm going to book a place on an open day. And we went on this open day. Rob came with me, and it was the thing that I needed to realize there is no longer heart in that path for me.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's like I had to start walking down the path a little bit to realize, oh no. And it didn't, you know, that could have been like oh, you know, I'm just being lazy, like I should carry on and do this now. Like I've wanted to do it for so long, so let me just do it. But it was like, oh no, but was the purpose of coming to this open day, was to realize that this is not my path. And it kind of was like closure for me on that. And
Mm.
I might do it one day, like when I'm retired, and I can still paint and draw if I want to now, but the degree thing is complete. And
Mm.
so it feels really special sometimes too. I guess there's flow in that, right? It's like there was the flow to book the open day, there was the flow to go, and then the flow stops. Like that is what happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Rivers peter out, right? Like, or they
Yeah.
reach the ocean and realize there's a whole wide world out there. Mm.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a beautiful example of um something actually the opposite of something feeling really good, but
Yeah.
then not having the heart there, not necessarily
Mm.
having the thing that's gonna allow you to continue that journey and allow almost consistency to take over at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the heart in it was um an echo. The heart was like my 18-year-old's heart. And so then there's this like, oh, to heal her, to be with her, I don't need to go and do this degree. I can just be with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's beautiful. And you know, it's opened up other ideas for me. It's opened up other avenues. So yeah, I think we get so caught up in like, what do I want and what do I not want? And I think just that question for me just dispels the want and the like and the dislike. Um, of just, is my heart here? Like, is there still heart in this for me? Because, you know, I wake up some days and I'm like, I can't do this business anymore. But like, my heart's in it. So it's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. Again, like relationships, if your heart is still in something that's challenging, if your
Yeah.
heart's still there, you
Yeah.
as annoying as the statement is, like something in you knows whether to continue something or not to continue something.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I love that this has ended up at this point, right? We're talking about business practices, and something that's really worked for me in my business is like these one line business plan things.
Mm.
Um, and like this kind of feels like one of them for me. It's just my one line business plan is to go, it's the heart in this path, right? Like, as cheesy as that sounds. Um, you know, the masculine way, the tried and tested consistency way would be the 10-page business plan, wouldn't it? And actually maybe we just need these one line business plans to keep us on track.
Mm. Yeah, I love that.
All
Is there
right.
anything else there for you? Or do
No,
you
that,
feel complete with that?
yeah, that feels complete for me. How about you?
Me too. Feels good.
Okay, thanks, Alex.